Hello everyone, it's me again, and today we're going to review the Quad ERA-1 planar magnetic headphone. So before we get into the headphone itself, let me tell you a bit about myself. So my first foray into hi-fi was dated back to around 2009. I got my first pair of real audiophile headphones, which happens to be the HD650. And at that time, I don't really have any, source equipment, so I just kind of plug it in my phone and put the volume to max, and that's pretty much it. And 1 year later, I got a shit stack. At that time, I remember it's the Modi and Magni first Jan. No, is it the second Jan or the first Jan? Can't quite remember. But yeah, I got a pretty basic stack at the time, and 1 year forward 1 year, I moved on to an Audi's LCD2. That was a major upgrade because the LCD2 was still, in my opinion, one of the best planars you can ever get. It has a very dark sound, kind of chocolatey, but very flavor rich. So you can, it's kind of the first planar to hit the market after so many years of manufacturers not producing any planar headphones. So when I got my LCD2, I almost ditched my 650 because it just sounds pretty weightless compared to the LCD2 because the LCD2 hits hard and the bass goes extremely low. So at the time, I simply didn't buy any dynamic headphones for a while. And then, forwarding 2 years, in 2013, I heard the Hi-Fi Man HE500 and I was absolutely hooked. At the time, the Audis seems to be somewhat too dark for me, because the one I've got is the first batch Audis, otherwise known as Revision 1. Audis keeps boosting their efficiency as well as brightening up their headphones, so later revisions no longer sound dark anymore, but first revisions sound kind of dark, so instead of going after another pair of Audis, I simply went to Hi-Fi Man and got a pair of HE500. It served me for about half a year before I made a major jump to the HE6. Well, they say the king of planar at the time. And the HE6, in short, is still one of the best planars around, unlike LCD2. LCD2 is still good, but it just sounds kind of dated. I went to a friend's house the other day and had listened to LCD2, and his model is a revision 2 anyways, and what I heard just doesn't quite match up to what the LCD2 used to be, because in my memory the LCD2 I've owned sounds pretty dark and chocolatey, very smooth, has very hard-hitting bass, but when I hear those again, I just don't I don't just feel I don't feel the same way anymore. It sounds kind of congested, very slow, and neither bright nor dark. It just sounds, well, pretty average. I guess I'm too used to the HE6 by then. And the time I got rid of my HE6 was around, let me see, it was probably around August 2016 when I heard the JPS Abyss, and I was absolutely gobsmacked by that headphone, which is right here. It's in its box right now. I put it back in the box 3 days ago because here it's just way too hot here, and hot weather can be damaging to the drivers, so I just put it back in the box. And yeah, that's pretty much my story about planar magnetic headphones. I haven't bought any other headphones, dynamic phones beside the HD650, the 600 here, the Ultrasone Pro 900, HFI 2400, as well as the Bayer Dynamic DT990, and those are the only 5 dynamic headphones I've bought, because I vastly prefer planars to dynamic variants because they have much deeper bass as well as a more relaxed mid-range. So when I heard that I can demo the Quad ERA-1, I immediately jump upon the opportunity, and here we are. I've had these phones for about 4 days, so I think I have a pretty good idea how these sounds. Well, for comparison, we're not going to compare it to the JPS Abyss because obviously that thing is, well, that's the best planar there ever is and sounds extremely close to an electrostatic headphone, so there is really no comparison between this and that $5,000 headphone. And instead, we'll actually be comparing it to the monoprice M1060. That's one headphone that I like very, very much. And because I'm not in the US right now, I don't have it with me, but from memory, these two actually have a lot in common. In that the M1060 has a pretty open, wide sound. Well, not as open as Hi-Fi Man's offerings like HE500 or HE6, or simply as, say, the Advanced Sounds Alpha Planar. But these have a pretty sweet sounding soundstage that's neither too big or small, so it kind of reminds me of the M1060. And the M1060 has a pretty far-reaching bass as well. Well, it doesn't reach as far as, say, an HE6 or HE500, but it still hits reasonably hard, and this can hits pretty hard too. The most noticeable difference switching from the HD600 to these is that this headphone is immediately more full-bodied. It has fuller lows as well as a more, well, delicate mid-range, because planars and stats tends to be more, well, refined sounding than their dynamic counterpart. When you switch from this to the HD600, you'll immediately notice that the HD600 sounds, well, rougher and has more edge to it. Some might like it, some might not, and I certainly like planars better than, generally I certainly like planars better than dynamic headphones. As for lows, these are pretty hard hitting, just like I said. Kind of make me remember the M1060 as well as Hi-Fi Man's HE400. Well, mind you, not the HE400i or S variant, just the original HE400. That one is the hardest hitting in the 400 family, and I still have one in my house in the US. That headphone is one of a kind. Has very good bass, pretty okay mids, and kind of twitchy highs, but it's not particularly hard to drive, so I can drive it pretty well out of the iFi Micro IDSD. So moving on to mids and highs, I think this headphone has pretty sweet mids and highs. For comparison's sake, I will compare it to the M1060 and Advanced Sounds Alpha again. As compared to the M1060, this thing sounds, well, of course, more open and more immediate. Like there's something unique about the sound just grabbed my attention when listening to vocal heavy music, that the vocals doesn't particularly jump out at you, but it has a nice quality to it that makes you feel like the singer is singing directly to you. And M1060 had that kind of quality as well. The Advanced Sound Alpha has pretty sweet mids too, although the presentation is slightly different from what we find here. Now, about the highs. The highs on these are pretty polite. It's nothing to write home about, but again, it's not bad at all. It's not dark, it's just relatively neutral, has okay quantity, but it's not its forte, you know? Planars aren't known for crystal highs, and this is no exception. To this day, except for the HE6 and the Abyss, I haven't heard another planar that has stats like highs, and this is certainly no exception. As for drivability, they advertise this headphone as pretty easy to drive and can get reasonably loud on a portable device. I can agree on that, because when I drive these off my iPhone, I usually dial the volume up to like 60%, and I can get plenty loud SPL. But when I plug it in, say, the iFi Micro IDSD, there's a pretty noticeable improvement. The bass just becomes more solid, and the whole sound tightens up a bit. Now, we have here the Emotiva Basics A100. This is essentially a speaker amp, and it's designed for speakers as well as planar headphones that are of very low efficiency, such as the HE6 and the Abyss. Now, I have some gripes about this amp because it has a very high noise floor, and generally, even with planars, you don't have much usable volume because it has so much power. You can't turn the volume anywhere say, you can't turn the volume up at all actually. Like on the Abyss, I can turn, on normal listening levels, I can turn it here at most. Yeah, I'm saying at most because usually I keep it plenty low, like here, and the minimal range is here, which means I can't turn it up at all. With this headphone though, I can turn it up like here, and it's already ear-bleedingly loud, so I won't turn it much. But again, this is simply an amp for very hard to drive planars. And this headphone gains more flash on the A100 as well as more dynamic and speed. But the difference between this one and the i-Fi is plenty small compared to the jump from a phone to the i-Fi. So, which means the i-Fi itself is already has lots of power, lots of features. So when driving these headphones, it doesn't slag too much behind its bigger brother, the Emotiva A100. And the i-Fi itself can drive the ERA-1 plenty well enough. So we've talked about lows, mids, and highs, as well as sound stage and drivability. And let me see what else we can talk about. Well, it's a fairly open headphone, so don't expect it to block much outside noise because, well, it's open. And it has an efficiency rating of 94 decibels per milliwatts, and I think that's kind of misleading because when you hear 94 decibels per milliwatts, you would think that it's a pretty hard to drive headphone, but actually that's not the case. It's plenty easy to drive and hits plenty hard. As for its price though, it's 600 British pounds. I don't know how much it will retail in the US, but I suppose it will be somewhere around 800 or 850. Not too sure about that, but if it's an $800 headphone, I don't think I would necessarily recommend it because in 800 range we have, let's see, well, for $450 you can get an HE500. And I don't think the HE500 necessarily sounds worse than these. So for the money, you'd better off get an HE500. I mean, this is not bad. This is certainly way easier to drive than the HE500. But you're just gonna be better off with the HE500 because it saves you hundreds of bucks. And when driven well, the HE500 has better mids as well as better treble extension. The quad just sounds a little more muffled in comparison. And moving on to $1,000 bracket, we have HE6. Well, nowadays the used HE6 goes for around $1,100, and I think you would rather add that $300 to get an HE6. The HE6 is way better than these. Well, not to say that these are bad, these are pretty exceptional, but the HE6 is just on another level. These can't quite compare. So yeah, if you really have tons of money to spare, then get an HE6. If you want to save money and get a pretty decent sounding headphone, then you can save $300 and get a used HE500. As for these quads, the advantage of these headphones is that these are extremely easy to drive. You can take it with you as they're not very big and plug it into a portable source and not worry about losing much sound quality. But on the downside, these are reasonably heavy. 460 grams means these are not the lightest headphones around. I feel much more comfortable around the HD600 than the quad, which means it's fairly weighty and doesn't feel comfy on your head. Can get too, the weight can be too much at times. But so far, I find it okay-ish because I'm pretty used to planar weights by now. I can wear the Abyss for 2 or 3 hours a day without feeling much fatigue, which means that wearing this headphone is not going to be a problem. So yeah, that sums up for sound quality and just soundstage and whatsoever you have in general. So yeah, I guess that's it. That's the review for the Quad ERA-1 headphone. And if I find out something more, I'll sure to post some updates on my YouTube page. Peace.